Today's episode is brought to you by our local sponsors, Ravenwood Incense and Fragrance Producers, Betsy Cornell, licensed massage therapist, and Courtney Wiggins, social justice activist seeking equality for all. Thank you so much for your support.
Welcome to Ask a Witch, a podcast fueled by the curiosity of listeners like you. Join our host as she discusses various aspects of witchcraft and spirituality with intellectual and authentic members of the metaphysical community. This podcast is made possible by Blessed Bee Tea and Apothecary, a one-stop witch shop nestled in downtown Traverse City, Michigan. And now your host, the bewitching Bellamy Black.
Hello, and welcome to Ask a Witch. I'm Bellamy Black. In this podcast, we talk about a variety of topics sent in by listeners like you. With me today, I have Dr. Sarah Montgomery Richards. She is a college professor of philosophy and religious studies. Sarah, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to have you on. I really like having a guest that has a doctor title.
Well, I only did it for the extra letters.
Well, I know it doesn't come easily, so congratulations. And I know that's a fairly new addition to your name. So
just walked in December.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I can't wait to get into our listener question with you, but first, can we chat about this tea?
It's amazing.
Good. I'm so glad you're enjoying
It's amazing.
it. I'm really enjoying it too. Today, we are drinking Blessed Bee Tea and Apothecary's own blend. This is Enchanting Chai. The catchline for this tea is that it contains so much magic, M-U-S-H, because it has chaga and reishi mushrooms in it. So it contains so much magic.
I love that.
We're so punny.
You are so punny. I would buy it just for the so mush magic.
Anytime that I can add some kind of like funky little phrasing into any kind of product that I'm making, even if it's just to make me laugh, I absolutely will. The ingredients in this tea are black china tea, Assam, and red rooibos tea. There's cinnamon, cardamom, cloves, ginger, black pepper, and licorice root, as well as chicory. So those are all kind of common ingredients in a chai. But the best part is the locally sourced chaga and reishi mushrooms in it. We get them from a company in town called Great Lakes Treats, which is, you can usually find them at the farmers markets here around town, but they're professional foragers. So they do all the foraging, and then I believe they grow some as well, but and also I think they just got a brick and mortar, which is really exciting for them. So they're growing and awesome people to work with, and their product is amazing. Chaga is an awesome ingredient because it is really good for everything, but especially it's good for heart, liver, and gut health. Spiritually as well as physically, it's also good for communication. And I say as well as physically because it contains cytokines, which help our cells talk to each other. So it's really cool. And because it has this aspect to it, these cytokines in it, it is really good for, people are using it for cancer research. So that the cells can talk to each other and kind of change their dialogue. So they're not overproducing. Yeah, so chaga is being used in cancer research right now. And then reishi is good for boosting your immune system. It's also good for mood stabilizing and balancing, and it is also being used in cancer research right now. So
how far we've come.
Yes, I know. Let's use mushrooms to fix the world.
Well, and rooibos, I think the first time I had rooibos was when I was in South Africa. So I have a soft spot in my heart for
it's so good.
Rooibos.
Yes. It's nutty. I love it. And it's a tea. It's a tea leaf, but it's not caffeinated. So that's nice. So you can drink it any time of the day. This tea itself is caffeinated because of the black tea in it, but the rooibos part is not. So see, it has so much magic in it.
Much magic.
So stupid. I love it so much.
It's so fantastic.
Well, I'm glad you like it. Sarah, before we get into this, I think we have a listener letter.
My lady, a message has arrived for you.
So here we go. Here's our letter. It says, Dear Bellamy Black, the thought of religion and spirituality has me conflicted. Growing up, my family was very religious, almost to the point where some may say it was cultish. There were expectations of behavior and punishment or ridicule if I did not comply. At first, these methods of fear-mongering completely turned me off of religion of any kind. I identified as atheist for years, but in my older age, I feel called to spirituality again. But I'm not sure where to start, really. I was researching Wicca and found the earth-based spiritual and energy-based practices of it to be intriguing, but ultimately I'm struggling with the underlying structure of it all. I kind of just want to be a free-range heathen.
I love it.
Me too. Is that okay? Does one have to associate with a particular religion in order to find their spiritual side? I want to learn, and in some ways, I need guidance, or at least I think I do. Where do I begin? Thank you, Bellamy. Looking forward to your upcoming episodes. Yours truly, settling into my spirit side. Do you find yourself craving more connection? Are you wanting to experience more emotional, physical, and spiritual intimacy with others? Or maybe you're longing for a better relationship with your own body and soul and unique purpose in this life. Belonging looks different for everyone, but the paths we take to get there, the path where we feel welcome and wanted in the world, is very similar. Katie May is a guide in the art of belonging, and she has been guiding people along those paths for years, through workshops, retreats, and one-on-one couples counseling. You can join her at Blessed Be for the Art of Belonging on Saturday, June 29th. On Saturday, July 27th, she'll be hosting Coco Relating, where she'll be sharing how to create more conscious, organic, committed, and open relationships. And on Wednesday, August 28th, for Blowjoy, where she'll show you how to take more pleasure in connecting with your partner and improve emotional and physical intimacy in your relationships. You can also check out her website for some free resources, coaching opportunities, and to keep up on the latest offerings at www.katiemazing.com. That's KATIEMAEZING.com, Katie Mazing. Can't make these classes? Check out blessedbt.com for more options. Yours truly, settling into my spirit side. Awesome.
Love it.
Letter. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about, and I can't think of a better expert to bring on to help me have this discussion. So Sarah, thank you so much for being here. Before we get into the specifics of this question, I'd like to learn a little bit more about you. So, and we like to do this with all of our guests. So if you feel comfortable, will you tell us a little bit about your kind of like spiritual awakening or where you're at spiritually?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I was raised Irish Catholic. That was the tradition of my childhood. And when I was, sophomore as an undergrad, I discovered, when I first went to school, Western Michigan University, go Broncos, I was going to be I was a history major. That's how I started out. And history was just like not doing it all the way for me. And I had taken a comparative religion class and really liked it. And I thought, well, as long as I'm major shopping, I'll just take another comparative religion class. And it was a theory of comparative religion and classical theories of comparative religion. That was it. I was hooked. Signed the major slip like 3 days later. Totally turned my world upside down. And through my academic learning, I realized about myself that Irish Catholicism wasn't the place where my heart was. And so over the years and over my studies, I think and actually it goes to one of the questions we're going to talk about today. I think I've built a rather eclectic cross-cultural personal spirituality that works for me, and it works for me. It doesn't have to work for anybody else.
Yeah, it's something I find very fascinating about you.
That's where I'm at. And so I study world religions, take students all over the world to study world religions. I am a mom, and so it has been really important to me over the years to essentially give my children everything, because I think there's value in learning a wide array and diverse pool of concepts and ideas and notions about spirituality and let them do as they will. If they pick one, great. If they do something eclectic, great. If they decide to be atheist, agnostic, secular humanist, that's great too. But I've at least provided them with the information that I think opens their minds to diverse perspectives. Just keep an open mind.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's a great approach to parenting, and one that's was not prevalent as we were growing up or as other generations were growing up. So I think opening hearts and allowing our kids the space to open their own hearts is super important too.
Absolutely. I mean, so I've got books on, like, we were talking about the Ganesh, the beautiful set of Ganesh cards over here, by the way, that you should come check out at the store. Unless I buy them first. But I've got, books for kids on Ganesh, and books for children on paganism, and books for children on Judaism, and you name it, it's on my bookshelf. And since I have children from lower elementary all the way through high school at this point, I also have, like, all the middle school age stuff and and beyond. So I've had to get more bookshelves.
That's fair. I think that people who are interested in religion or and you're also a professor, but I find that my book collection is consistently growing all the time. And in fact, I have the bookshelf here is just constantly rotating, and sometimes I'm taking those books home and bringing the books I'm done with back, and just kind of always
that's me in my office. Sometimes
the
the Tibetan astrology is at home, and sometimes it lives in the office, and sometimes the Bhagavad Gita's home, and
Yes, absolutely. So you're a professor now, and you teach philosophy.
So I teach for two different institutions.
Sure.
One of them kind of houses comparative religion in, like, the umbrella of the philosophy department, and then the other one actually has a philosophy and religion department. So it kind of depends on what institution you're teaching for, where they put comparative religion.
Sure. I've had some of your students in here, and they really enjoy your classes. And in fact, it's you mentioned that your professor, or you took a comparative religions class and then signed your major slip 3 days later. So you must have had an inspiring professor, and must have probably pulled inspiration from teachers like that. And now you're being a teacher like that.
I'm a teacher, and I'm proud to say that I keep sending students back to Western Michigan University, because actually Western has, and I didn't know this because I didn't go there for comparative religion, but Western has one of the oldest comparative religion departments at a public university in the country.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because really, comparative religion is a relatively new field. We're talking, like, 50s and 60s, kind of that era. And a lot of the movers and shakers were at the University of Chicago back in the day. And Western had a very kind of religion-friendly philosophy department at that time. And so a lot of those, like, new comparative religionists found themselves a home at Western, and then eventually they were able to form their own department. So now I have multiple students at Western studying comparative religion, and this past fall I heard from one former student who's an undergrad there, and one of his instructors was also a former student of mine who's now a grad student there. Oh. So it's, like, starting to come full circle. I'm like, this is really cool. Maybe it means I'm getting old, but this is also really cool.
Yeah, look at all those lives you've touched, though. It's amazing.
I love it. Love it.
Awesome. Well, what do you think about our listener letter?
Well, the first thing that struck me when I was looking at it and considering it, right after the listener said, I kind of just want to be a free range heathen. Is this okay? And I put a note in, of course it's okay.
Yeah.
Of course it's okay. And I think that goes to, I think one of your other questions too, that religion and spirituality is so personal.
It is.
And, we talk a lot in my classes about how, even an experience can be deeply spiritual. Two people can have the exact same experience at the exact same time,
Yes.
And it could be a profoundly spiritual experience for one person, and just a nice, enjoyable, profane experience, ordinary experience.
Yes.
For somebody else. And that's okay. It's interpretation that makes the difference. So, of
Yeah,
course,
absolutely.
settling into my spirit side, of course it's okay.
Yes. I find that, and I get this a lot in the shop, people asking permission to be spiritual.
Of course.
And so I find that they're asking all the time. And so I'm glad that they even asked that question, just this 3-word question, is this okay? And so part of this podcast is giving people permission to seek spirituality in whatever way serves them best. I think sometimes we have to dip our feet in all kinds of different areas and kind of anthropologically kind of religion shop and jump around and do all these different things. And sometimes you might find aspects that don't suit you, so don't use those things. And sometimes you might find things that suit you really well, so use that. And then you might learn later that something about that doesn't really resonate with you, and it's okay to give it up. It's okay
to let go of something.
Yeah, it's okay to just bounce around and just find what works best for you, and maybe you latch onto something in a moment because it's important to you at that time. And maybe you find later that you don't necessarily need that anymore, and it's okay.
Yeah.
To move around and do different things.
And I would caveat that just by saying, like, from the perspective of certain more established religious traditions that wouldn't be permissible, right?
Correct.
But I think, therein lies the difference between institutionalized religion and spirituality.
Yes. So can we talk a little bit about
Absolutely.
what the difference is between religion and spirituality? Because in my world, I see those as separate things that can coexist together, but in a lot of ways, they're two totally different things.
Yeah, can coexist. I think that's a really great way of putting it.
Good.
So I think of spirituality as being the personal stuff, right? The non-institutionalized forms of of connecting with what I like the term ultimate sacred reality. It's a term I like to use in my courses because I think it's more encompassing of the vast array of ways that people refer to gods, goddesses, spirit, whatever.
Sure.
So ultimate sacred reality. And so, that's that inner connection, that inner life, the way someone personally connects with ultimate sacred reality. And then I think of religion as more of the institutionalized patterns, and more like formalized responses, if you will,
Yes.
to responding to the sacred. And that doesn't mean that's bad.
Right.
Formalized responses can be great. Going to temple in India is great, and there are things that you do. And
Yes.
Going to mass or going to a full moon circle, right? There can be those formalized responses. So that doesn't necessarily have to be bad. But I think, and we're seeing this more and more, when I say we, I mean as academics, the increasing number of people who consider themselves to be something like spiritual but not religious, or unaffiliated, and by unaffiliated they mean like, on that list where you've got to check the box
Yes,
of what you are,
the
like
census list.
I'm not going to
Yes.
check a box,
Right.
thing.
Right.
And so we're seeing an increasing number of people that feel more comfortable in that category. So I definitely think, obviously there are very spiritual people who engage in institutionalized religion, or more formalized processes, and are very spiritual.
Yes.
But I think that we are just seeing that it's happening without necessarily having to check a box.
Yeah. So I think that kind of relates to this listener's statement too about how they were drawn towards Wicca and like the Wiccan faith, and then found that it to be too structure based.
It can be.
Yeah. So I found that when I was coming out of structured religion, so I was raised Christian, raised Lutheran, and did all the things and catechism and all the hoopla and all the ritual and sacraments and all that, which I learned a lot from, and if you listen to our first episode, I talk a little bit about my spiritual background and where that came from. But I respect it. I respect my upbringing. I respect what I learned, and it was very inspiring for me in a lot of ways. But I just didn't want to be bound to that one faith and one religion. And a couple of my friends in high school were Buddhist, and I was like, "What's that all about?" And I wanted to learn all about, my barefoot hippie friends are all Buddhist, and so I started learning about that, and ultimately found that like the earth is really where I was being called to. And so in college, I picked up a book on Wicca, and that felt like an easy transition for me to go from the structure of Christianity, where there's a pastor at the head of the church, leading ritual in a lot of ways, to Wicca, which has a high priest or a high priestess, and they have holidays that they celebrate, which match with the Christian calendar very closely. Yep. And also had like, this is how you do your spells, which are like prayers. And like everything just kind of, the structure of it made sense to me. But the more I learned about like the history of it and some of the, some of the rules that were a little bit more structured, like this is how you have to do it, I was like, I just don't really want the structure of it anymore. And so I relate to this question a lot, because I really didn't want to be in a box. I didn't want to check a box.
I don't want to check a box.
I just wanted to learn all the things and pull from multiple religions and, find what was spiritually feeding me and use that. So I would say that I'm more spiritual than religious. But there is a lot of beauty in religion.
Absolutely. I am so excited. I was sharing earlier that I get to take students back to India this May, and I can't wait to be in a temple.
Oh, jelly.
I'm tripping over myself.
Yes.
So excited to be able to do things like that again. And I know I could drive downstate and do it, but it's not the same.
Yes. Yeah. The Dearborn temples are really awesome. I hung out with some Krishnas in college.
Oh, nice.
We went to Dearborn and went to a Krishna temple, and that was stunning and beautiful. Awesome. And I got to wear a sari, and they got me all
I have my
dressed
saris.
up, and it was just the vegetarian food was amazing, and the music and the dancing, and there's something so beautiful about that. But I also felt pressure. They took me on this field trip to this temple, and then they're like, "So when are you converting?" And I was like, I'm not. And then I found myself pulling away from their community, although I really loved the community. Yeah. I felt like I was wasting their time.
Huh. It's interesting because and maybe we're getting off topic here, but there's this like, and I'm very much paraphrasing this, but kind of thought that in Hinduism that there are many paths up the mountain.
Yes, there absolutely are.
There isn't there are just many paths up the mountain, just like there are many names for God. Yes. But God is one. I mean, from that particular tradition. But anyway.
Yes. So, I don't think it's too off topic. I think, this person is kind of religion shopping, as I called it before. And so I think that, that those are kind of some conflicts that come up, is like, I want to step into this religion and kind of learn more about it. But then there's like witnessing, or like feeling like there's obligation to, join their side or their religion. And sometimes that can be a little off-putting for people.
Yeah, I think it makes there's a huge difference in who you connect with. Yeah. Right? Who you're able to get that window into a particular tradition with. I mean, maybe the universe has just looked out for me and I've had really good luck. But I've never felt pressured in any of the diverse situations that I've been in to be anything than whatever it is that I am.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really awesome and really special. This person mentioned that their initial religious experience felt a bit cultish, like a bit cult-like. And a birdie told me that is one of your favorite things to discuss.
You must have talked to a former student. So then Sarah gets on her soapbox. I really don't like that word.
Yeah. So tell us why. So we see it everywhere.
Yeah, we see it everywhere.
I was just scrolling through the documentaries in Hulu, and it's all like religious cult, escaping the cult, escaping twin flames, like all these things. And so tell us, what word would you use in lieu of cult?
New religious movement.
Okay.
Or alternative religion would be, but even alternative religion is like, okay, alternative to what?
Sure.
Right? I much prefer new religious movement. I think it has far less baggage associated with it. I think, so in the academic study of religion, we use the terms sect and cult neutrally. They represent different levels of difference, if you will, when compared to what we would generally consider like kind of the establishment.
Sure.
Right? Sects tend to be more like offshoots or branches of something, whereas a cult, and like I said, the word just makes me cringe.
I see the cringe.
It just bothers me. Tends to represent a bigger break or a more eclectic mix, maybe of belief. Usually, in all those instances, whether it's a sect or a cult or whatever, there's charismatic leaders involved, but there were charismatic leaders that founded what are currently thought of as the establishment, right? Established traditions. I think, it's that baggage,
Sure.
that popular culture has put on the word cult that makes it very problematic to use in an academic setting.
Gotcha.
We try to, with lots of caveats, because it is a little different. The movements in that category are a little different than sectarian movements. But there's something about that word that hooks people differently, right?
Yeah.
And language is very powerful.
It is.
And we need to, not that we can't feel free to like express our authentic selves, right? But we need to be careful how we use language. And because of the baggage that has been just that the term cult has been loaded with, I tend to find myself asking questions when I see that term in an article or, online, like you were saying, or hear it out, because we're hearing it everywhere right now. I tend to ask myself, who is doing the labeling and why?
Sure.
Why are they using that specific word?
Yeah.
What message are they trying to convey by using that specific word as opposed to new religious movement, which they arguably are?
Right. When talking to practitioners who have left that new religious movement, do you think that they use the word cult because they've had some kind of traumatic incident? And because cult is associated negatively, they associate their experience negatively. And so when it's like their form of protection, so they can say like, hey, I left this thing that was really traumatic. I'm going to label it as cult.
Yeah, I think
I've heard people say like leaving Jehovah's Witness, that Jehovah's Witness was a cult. And it is likewise a new, argue. Well, and then you get into splitting hairs, like, okay, what qualifies as new anymore, right? Yeah.
Because there are traditions that are pretty much like basically mainstream.
Yeah.
These days that aren't that old.
Right.
But so is there like a line where like, okay, longevity plays a role, and then all of a sudden you're not new anymore? Because once upon a time, Buddhism was a new religious movement. It came out of Hinduism.
Yeah. Well, Wicca's not that old. Wicca,
Right.
that started in like the 60s. So.
Right. So I tend to ask. I'll go back to your question. So when I'm asking the questions about who's doing the labeling and why are they doing the label, why choose that particular word, one of the questions I also then like ask myself is like, okay, are these disaffected former members, people who have experienced some kind of negative experience in some sort of way? Are they family members that are just mad that little Susie isn't what they raised her to be anymore?
Right.
so I think asking those questions is important. I don't think thinking about those things in any way invalidates someone's trauma, because, and I would never, ever, ever say that everything a new religious movement has done has been good.
Right.
But
there's
the
obviously flaws in like every religion.
Established faith traditions, I would argue, have not always done great things.
Nope, we're still struggling.
right, have not always done great things. And so I think to just automatically be suspicious of new religious movements, I don't think it's necessarily fair. But I think at the same time, you have to honor that trauma, recognize that that is somebody's very real lived experience from their perspective, and then work on that from there. The other thing to keep in mind, and actually I gave an interview not long ago for a follow-up article for the student newspaper on essentially just this topic. For a lot of these new religious movements, we don't have a lot of really good information, right?
Right.
We have, you mentioned some of the recent documentaries that have, been put out on a variety of movements.
Right.
We have the documentaries with individuals' firsthand accounts of what their experiences are. Great, we've got that.
Sure.
And then we have, in a lot of cases, some very limited information on the movement's website itself, right? And there's not a lot of real research in between. So it's really hard to, as an academic say, well, this is what I can say I actually know.
Right.
Truly know about this tradition, because you're kind of getting from the insider, two different insider perspectives,
right,
I guess.
Right, and documentaries can always be skewed in
and
a
who pays for
direction,
them?
and right, and it can
Who
be
sponsored that
biased,
documentary?
and exactly. There's another documentary I watched. I think it's called Wild Country, which was fascinating, and that religious movement occurred over decades. They spent decades building communities, and there's obviously got to be something great and something powerful and very spiritual about those movements. Was the leader corrupt? Did he buy a bunch of Rolls Royces with tithings? Yes. There's obviously issues, maybe sexual assault or other things that have happened in that movement, but was there spirit in that movement at some point? Probably, who's to say, and that's,
who's to say?
That's where,
I think we're back to personal experience.
Again. And so that's where, I always kind of encourage people to do what works best for them, and not to be too blindsided or just go with the flow. We're individuals. We're strong in our individuality. We're all individually powerful. And so it's that lemming mentality, the crowd mentality that gets us into trouble. And I think that's kind of something, there's something to be said about that in political movements with religion too.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to follow this presidential candidate because my religion told me to.
Right.
Or, but that's not thinking for yourselves, and that's not opening your mind, and it's not opening your heart. It's just following blindly. And I think that's where people get in trouble with what they would call cults.
Yep. Yeah, and I would say what I say to my students: ask questions.
Yes.
For heaven's sakes, there's no reason to not ask questions. Ask
Right.
all of the questions. Do all of your own research, and at the end of the day, trust your gut.
Yeah, and get valid responses.
Yeah.
Because I said so is not an answer.
No, my children remind me that because just because you said so isn't an answer. I'm your mother, it's fine.
That's a little different. As a parent, I can say that's a little
because
different.
I said so. But no, because I said so is no. So ask questions, do your research, make informed decisions.
Yeah.
And I would say that about anything.
Yeah, absolutely. This wasn't one of our questions listed here, but do you know much about chaos magic?
A little bit, not much.
So I had a customer seek out private, like a one-on-one session. They were continuing their witchcraft education, and they were looking into chaos magic. And so that gave me the opportunity.
It's the Kurt Vonnegut stuff, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and actually, David Bowie used chaos magic for like writing his songs.
Starman.
And yes, and for anybody who doesn't know, David Bowie is one of my favorite people in the entire world. In fact, if you want to send me fan mail that's just David Bowie, I would be so delighted. And
I taught my children when they were like little. We would, as we're in the car, and the Rolling Stones would come on, and so then I taught them different things. Like, what do we say about the Rolling Stones? They're one of the greatest rock and roll bands of all time, Mom. Like, just like the pat answers that they're supposed to feed back to me. And so when David Bowie comes on, what the pat answer is, he's God. Yes. What do we know about David Bowie?
That's kind of funny because I have my personal altar at home, and I have my pagan altar and it also is an ancestral altar. But then I have an entire shrine devoted to David Bowie. And in some ways, like I see him as a god, and it's, I was listening to, there's another podcast called Millennial Pagan Podcast, and they were talking about how millennials or younger generations are using even like Marvel characters as like gods that they like are like recognizing. So they maybe they work with the like Germanic version of Thor specifically, but they have a action figure of Chris Hemsworth on their altar because he's Thor. Like that's how they envision him.
Do you still have Starman tarot here?
I sold it. But I can always get it back.
Yeah, it's excellent. Just saying.
It is one of my favorite.
I love it. It's
decks.
So beautiful.
And it is rough. It hits you right at the core. It
does.
For sure. But yeah, so I have this like whole shrine to David Bowie, and in a lot of ways, he emulates a lot of what I try to do here in the being open to change and being open to perspective, being a sanctuary and an open, safe space to the alternative, and I say that loosely, person, the nerd or the witch or the neurodivergent or the outcast or whoever. Like that's who David Bowie spoke to, and that's who I hope to speak to. So it's like that. We're getting on a tangent because I could talk about Bowie forever, but
yes. No, I mean, I always say that, like, as a teenager, when I discovered David Bowie, like, he gave me permission to be myself.
Yes.
Like, he gave me permission to be the tie-dye sheep.
Yeah.
And that was okay.
Yeah.
And that was a time in my life when, like, it wasn't okay for me to be the tie-dye sheep.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, here's this being who embodied, like, you can be whatever you want to be, which actually brings us back on topic.
Back to this, yes.
Look at us come full circle.
And Bowie will do that every time.
I'm so proud of us.
But yeah, so I think that's exactly right. Like, or finding a space or a shop or a character or a persona, a famous persona that makes you feel safe in you deciding to go an alternative direction from your spiritual upbringing or your, set way of living that isn't quite working for you. Somebody puts you in a box that you don't fit in. Finding a place where you can seek a comfortable outlet or an area where you can educate yourself and learn and grow in a safe way is super important. This person,
because even asking some of these questions, right, in certain environments, is even asking the questions isn't okay, and so finding a safe space to even. And I see some of my students do that in my classes that. They're like, well, this might sound like a stupid question, or I don't mean to offend you by this. I'm like, look, number one, nothing. No, there are no stupid questions. Number two, there's no way you can offend me. And so finding even if it is in an academic setting, even if that's it, finding a safe space to ask questions, I think, is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of comes back to this question too. Where do I begin? Where do I? I feel this need to branch out, and I don't know even where to start. And so if somebody is kind of questioning their spiritual path, where would you send them besides to take your class?
Selfishly. My head and my heart always goes to learning. And I think that's a piece of who I was raised to be that has stuck with me over the years. The first time I was like, oh, I want to learn about paganism when I was a teenager, and I want to learn about Buddhism, was that I did go to my local bookstore, and I found like the one like cheesy book on like all of those things in my local little teeny tiny small town bookstore.
Right, Buddhism for Dummies.
Essentially, yeah, right, and it was essentially paganism for dummies too. And they, of course, didn't have anything on Hinduism. I'm like, no way, right? I went to a store because I also couldn't find anything in my teeny tiny library.
Right.
From when I was young, and now the world is our library now.
Yes.
I mean, there's holy internet Batman.
Yes.
Right. And of course, there's a lot of junk.
Right. I was just gonna say that comes with a lot of pros and cons.
There's a lot of junk. Once again, from an academic perspective, I tend to trust peer-reviewed journal articles.
Sure.
On the various topics. There are some, like, especially if you go to like the American Academy of Religion's website, I would highly recommend. Actually, this is a great place for somebody to start. Harvard Pluralism Project.
Okay.
Is an excellent website for someone who is just beginning to explore, because they have a whole section where you can. And now, granted, there's not every permutation of religion is on there, but there's quite a lot, and it would be an excellent place for people to start. It's one of the places where I send students who are like working on group projects on various religions. I'm like, look, this isn't like where you stop research,
Right.
but this is a good place to start. You can click on the religion. You can learn about the history. You can learn about belief systems. You can learn about how it lives and breathes in the modern world. So I would highly recommend the Harvard Pluralism Project.
Yeah, I think that's I think starting academically is something that a lot of people don't reach for first.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people find it or could find it dry or like, but if you want to be...
It's a great website. I promise. It's a really good website.
Let's say it again. It's Harvard.
The Harvard Pluralism Project.
Great. And we'll make sure we'll link that in our show notes for us, because I think it is wise to start with knowledge and with unbiased, academic knowledge is a huge start. And I like I said, I don't think that's something people usually reach for first, but I like that idea. I like the idea of coming into something with a background of the history and the practices and what might be closed practices or where you might be able to seek out more information to find the spirit side of the knowledge that you read first.
Absolutely, because then you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Right?
My tax guy says that all the time.
You don't know what you don't know. But how can you formulate the questions, right? How do you know what questions to ask?
Right.
And so I think, one of the questions we had kind of talked about was, is it, do I have to find a teacher or somebody to guide you? And you can. But there are plenty of solitary practitioners of all different kinds of things out there. I have plenty of Christian friends who don't go to church, but that's still like how they connect with ultimate sacred reality is through like a Christian modus operatus, if you will. And so, but how would you even, at least I don't know how I would. I can't speak for everybody, but I don't know how I would come up with, I wouldn't know what to ask if I didn't at least like kind of generally understand the basics.
Yeah, and not Wikipedia.
And not Wikipedia, please.
The teacher in you is like,
oh, cringe-worthy.
You cringed more than when I said
more
cult.
Cringe. No, because then then when you sit down with a Buddhist priest, you have a place to start.
Yeah, an educated place to start.
And you don't have to have all the answers.
Right.
But having a little bit of even just the vocabulary can also help you break down any barriers that person might perceive. Like, why is this person coming to ask me questions? You know? And if you can be there in an authentic, informed way, I think that can go a long way too.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's wonderful. One point that I'd like to make is that I've actually had people come to me like ashamed that they call themselves a Pinterest witch or an Instagram witch or a TikTok witch, and again, like, I like to give people permission to find spirituality and what works best for them. There are books out there, hardcover bound books that have been in publication for, multiple decades or centuries, and they're not great. There's books out there that are kind of terrible. There's books out there that are great.
There are all kinds of books that are terrible.
And now it's like people are self-publishing all the time, and so there's tons of stuff out there that is just like fast fashion, mass-produced, kind of just let's get a book of 365 spells out there and call it good, So there's information out there that doesn't have intention or heart or research behind it, and I think the same is true on TikTok or Instagram. There's tons of feeds out there that are just garbage. Yeah. And there's tons of people who I'm going to say gatekeeping, and there's differences between cultural appreciation and appropriation, but there's people out there just telling you no and that you're doing it wrong. And I think you got to look kind of beyond some of that stuff and think for yourself and not be a lemming, and make your own decisions about that stuff and research it further and come up with your own conclusions around that. But if you find something that's spiritually moving for you on Instagram or TikTok or what have you, good for you. That's great. And I think that's wonderful. If you find something that you're like, oh, I don't know what chaos magic is, I want to learn more about that.
Right.
Then go do that. Yeah. I should probably circle back to chaos magic while I just said that.
That's right. Hey, you did it again.
But what the quick thing I wanted to say about that is that one of the core concepts of chaos magic is kind of like method acting for religion. And so what they do is they find a religion is calling to them for whatever reason, and they immerse themselves in that religion as if they have been assimilated into that religion their whole life. So they kind of take this like almost anthropologic method acting kind of perspective to it, where they go, I believe this wholeheartedly. So say somebody wanted to kind of chaos magic into Christianity. They would say, I believe that Jesus died for my sins and that he was our one true savior and this is the one true religion. And they tell themselves that they believe that. They give themselves that rhetoric. And then, but all the while kind of knowing in the back of their heads that they're just kind of method acting while they're here. But the immersion into that religion allows them to feel and believe and see the religion in the same eyes as the people who have been practicing it for so long. And so when they decide to leave that religion, which ultimately people in chaos magic do, because it's very Loki-esque and very, I'm going to go do what suits me when I feel like it, they take something with them. They take part of that religion with them, and they learn something from it. And they're not taking it to take it for themselves. They're not stealing it, but they see it and they can appreciate it, and so they learn something from it, and so what they're taking is knowledge with them, rather than like
an experience.
So that's kind of interesting too. I like that.
Something you're saying about like essentially like live and let live, right? Let people make their own decisions and do their thing. We have an expression at my house. You shouldn't yuck somebody else's yum.
Yes. So I have an 8-year-old too.
Yeah. Don't yuck somebody else's yum.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, we are pretty much at time. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Oh gosh. Wow, I don't think so. I mean, I think there was a question about, is it necessary to pick and practice one specific? And once again, I think we're back to personal choice.
Yeah.
And just be an informed, globally responsible, engaged human that's respectful of the variety of diverse paths that exist in the world.
Yeah, so Sarah and I both kind of follow this kind of eclectic path where we've chosen a lot of different spiritual modalities to kind of choose from. But again, we don't have anything against formalized structured religion.
That's
and
great.
There's a lot of beauty in that, and there's a lot of community in that, and a lot of personality types really need that go to church every Sunday mentality, or no fish on Fridays mentality, So like,
there's that whole Durkheimian thing about, humans need social structure, and religion can be one of those things that provides social structure on some level for humans.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm going into functionalism. So.
Could take the academic out of
Yeah,
the academy.
academic
Yeah, so I think that whatever works best for you is what works best for you. And then again, going back to just making conscious and rational decisions in your practices and being safe, keeping yourself safe. There is a lot of, negativity out there, or, things can go in negative directions all the time because
doesn't matter.
There is always going to be dark in the world because
and it doesn't even have to be related to religion.
Light. Right, exactly. So, just always be careful out there and always make informed decisions. Knowledge is power. I'll say that 1,000 times. Knowledge is power. Go listen to David Bellamy because he'll change your world.
You have to.
And he's God.
And he's God. That's one thing we can agree on.
Yeah. For always
we
and
agree
forever.
on lots of things, but Bowie being God is, that's
absolutely. Thank you so much for this listener letter, guys. If you want to send us listener letters, you can send them to our email at bellamyblack333@gmail.com, or you can send them directly to the shop here, which is 116 East Front Street. That is the South Suite, Traverse City, Michigan, 49684. That gets delivered right here back to the shop. The email goes directly to me, so you guys can always send in those questions. I love the questions. They mean the world to me. It's what fuels the podcast. So please send in your questions. No question is a stupid question.
There are no stupid questions.
You cannot offend me. Please send in your questions. You cannot offend me.
No.
And if you have a question, somebody else in the class probably has the same question. So.
Yes, absolutely.
So please send them in. Sarah, thank you so much for being
here. This was so fun.
Thank you for enjoying the tea with us. And if you guys have any questions for Sarah, feel free to email us as well. Sarah,
absolutely.
If people want to find you or ask you questions or take your classes, where might they find you?
You can find me right now at Northwestern Michigan College. And I'm on the employee directory. Sarah
You're
Montgomery
right there.
Richards.
I looked it up.
I'm there. And then I also teach for Adrian College down in Southeast Michigan.
Awesome. So, and also Western Michigan is highly recommended.
Yeah, go Broncos.
Also, my husband is an alum. So
I knew I liked you. You have good taste.
I do have good taste. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thanks again.
Yep, this has been Ask a Witch. I am Bellamy Black. Thank you guys. Have a great day. Before we conclude our episode, we want to talk to you about our feature business of the day, Charles and Reed Detroit-style pizza. These guys are no squares, but their pizzas are. Expertly baked in square pans and topped with a thick layer of rich sauce. Oh, and you gotta try their subs, salads, and specialty items. They are amazing. Located in the alleyway between Front and State Street, downtown Traverse City, Michigan. Order food to go or stop by for a beer and have a go at the bubble hockey table. Dan and the crew at Charles and Reed have been huge supporters of Blessed Be and Ask a Witch since day one. They are a small family-run business just living the dream of gifting the world with great pizza. Stop in and grab a slice today. 113 East Front Street, Traverse City, Michigan. Check our show notes for more details. Thank you, Charles and Reed, for your support.
This has been Ask a Witch with Bellamy Black, a podcast fueled by the curiosity of listeners like you. We have a strong presence on the World Wide Web. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Ask a Witch Bellamy. Check out our live recordings on our YouTube channel at Ask a Witch Bellamy. Handles are listed in the show notes. For a chance to meet Bellamy in person, visit Blessed Be Tea and Apothecary in Traverse City, Michigan.